to the Pulse Collective podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the PCP, otherwise known as the Pulse Collective podcast. This is the show where we sit down with top business leaders and entrepreneurs to help uncover their journeys, lessons, and the vision for the future of their businesses. I'm your host, as always, Shahrukh Ansari. For those of you watching or listening for the first time, we are Pulse Collective. So we're a growth partner for businesses all across the country. We help them multiply their revenue, unlock their potential through AI-powered systems. So if you are looking for ways that you're not just trying to do the same stuff that isn't working for you, but actually attract more clients, focus on boosting your retention, and elevate your overall customer experience, you're in the right place. Drop us a message down below and I'll have somebody from our team reach out to you to see if it's potentially a good fit for us to work together. Now that we have that out the way, today I'm very excited because I have a very special guest for everybody. I'm joined by Saumya Bhatnagar, who's the co-founder and chief product officer over at Jeeva AI, which is actually a company that does similar work to what we do, but they're redefining how sales teams operate through agentic AI that actually automates the entire process from prospecting, outreach, inbox management, and more. Saumya has really built her career on the intersection of product, engineering, and AI innovation. This is not her first business venture, so I'm really excited to dive into her entrepreneurial experiences. And with Jeeva's recent growth, she's now helping reshape how modern revenue teams are starting to look like in today's AI accelerated world. So Saumya, I wanted to give a quick introduction of yourself. Welcome to the show. Can you just kick us off by sharing a bit about your background and what Jeeva is really all about?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So, I have forever been a builder. I call myself a builder instead of a product person or an engineering person, but I think I'm happiest when I'm turning an idea into some version of tech reality. I've been doing that over 3 companies. Started off, just stumbling into this in high school. My Indian parents nearly had a heart attack. Some stereotypes are true. They weren't like, what, no degree? You want to start a business? What are you talking about? But eventually, was able to turn that into something meaningful and really loved the experience. And now I continue to do that with newer companies, newer businesses, newer ideas. And right now, working on Jeeva and trying to build, redefining how sales teams can bring more business, especially in unpredictable environments as we are in right now. So yeah, that's a little about me.
Very cool. So before you got into entrepreneurship, like what was your initial when you were in high school? What did you think that you were going to be doing?
I have no idea. Like I come from a family of doctors. We have everything, like from a trauma surgeon to a psychiatrist, all in the family. The positive is you rarely fall sick because the negative is you get overdiagnosed. But they wanted me to follow in those footsteps and, become a surgeon like my dad. And I remember when I was 16, my dad took me behind like this, those Grey's Anatomy kind of observation rooms. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know those were a thing, but, he took me there and because like, you're going to see your first surgery, you're going to fall in love with it. And, he walked in after the surgery to find that, I'd like passed out. And he went like, well, if the doctor and the patient are both unconscious, I don't think there's going to be a surgery. And he went like, go child, do what you want. And, I joke, and a lot of people joke about me that I think in code, I think in decision trees. Like that's just how my mind or my neural pathways are kind of set. So, computer science became a very obvious choice for me, and it kind of set me on this path.
Cool. It took a little bit of trauma to
Yeah.
unlock what you really
And I
wanted
have a
to do.
bump on my head to prove it. I got 2 stitches.
So anybody ever asked the story about what got you into entrepreneurship, just show them
I
the bump on
know.
your
I
head.
was so worried I'm going to have like a tiny bald spot. Thank God, like that didn't happen.
No, that's really cool. Like I feel like I'm especially excited to speak with you today, just because obviously I've actually been a user of your software before, so I've used it firsthand. We actually, I was newer to the organization that was
Mhm.
adopting it, so for me, I had not gotten like all the
Yeah.
functionalities that it's actually capable of compared to people that were using it much longer than I was. So at a high level, when you're talking about Jeeva specifically, because I want to talk about your role today, What's your day-to-day look like? What does the company actually do more specifically? So you mentioned basically everything to help enable sales teams. So can you get a little bit specific? Like what exactly do you
Yeah.
help with?
So if I talk about a very high, like product level vision of what we have, our thought process is that sales teams spend 60% of their job doing non sales tasks, which includes like responding to emails, drawing up contracts, finding leads, prospecting, cleaning those leads out, sending outreach,
All about that.
calendaring. Like that is the predominant job of a salesperson as opposed to actually being on calls and selling. And like in B2B SaaS especially, the amount you are talking to people and the number of prospects you're interacting with, activity, pipeline activity is what determines velocity, like in very simple terms.
Absolutely.
So our thought process was, what can we do to bring that time, like that 60% of time, back into selling as opposed to simply doing these supplementary tasks that have very little contribution to actual success of a deal closing. So, keeping that in mind, we started looking at each workflow of a sales rep, which started with prospecting, finding leads, enriching leads, which is where we realized a bulk of the actual work. And we were like, how can we make that easier? Fuse AI in it to make it more self-serve. Starting, moved on to enrichment, moved on to actual outreach, moved out to inbox management, and then calendaring. And then inbound, like how do you find inbound leads that are coming onto your website and those are hot leads? How do you manage those? And kind of just grew that ecosystem. And that's kind of what in at a very high level like Jeeva does. There's of course a lot of additional like micro workflows that we're continuing to automate. But basically anything that a salesperson does that doesn't have anything to do with selling, we're trying to automate.
Think as this speaks my language because as a salesperson and like I've come from various sales backgrounds. I worked at IBM for a few years and I sold enterprise level software to a lot of different companies. And I just remember I would plan out my calendar from 9 to 5, where 9 to 12 was me building a list and figuring out like who I'm reaching out to. First, I need to identify the company revenue size that I need to target, what the personas are. Eventually, we came out with this sales assistant. It was like a
Yeah.
IBM Watson tool that allowed us to essentially like research some of these prospects. It made it a bit easier, but it was still very like broken, the system. So I would actually find myself in terms of picking up the phone and calling people or actually coming on to meetings, I would actually say it was less than 40% of the time. Like most of my work, even after I hop on a call, my call might be 30 minutes, but now I'm spending 30, 45 minutes updating the
Yeah.
CRM after the call is done. And there's always constantly things that are changing. So this is why this particular conversation, it sits at home for me. But I'm really intrigued by that. I want to ask you like just overall your story before you got into this. I know you've had multiple entrepreneurial ventures before. What were those like, and what kind of like would you say there was a linear road that brought you to this point, or was it just kind of random?
I think answering your latter question first, I think there is entrepreneurship is more like a roller coaster. There is like no linear path. Somebody was joking with me the other day and said like people who are entrepreneurs, they're like adrenaline junkies. Like they just can't have like a set day, and they get bored with it really quickly. And I feel like that's like kind of the vocational hazard. It's not like you are like this. I think you have to get comfortable with this lifestyle to be able to be an entrepreneur. So it definitely wasn't linear, in short. But I think I had a predisposition towards trying to figure out how things worked and trying to figure out flaws in, things around me and try to make a better version of it. I think it started when I was like 10 or 12, where one of our family friends couldn't find like O negative blood and they kind of needed it. And I started thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if like all hospitals had a network where they could kind of figure out who has what in their blood bank so that, you can optimize for patients. And, there can be a transaction fee or something like that. And I started thinking about it when I was like 10. And my dad was like, yeah, it's a great idea, but in India, it's really regulated. And I started looking at it and I was 10 or 12 years old, I think. So, I always had this predisposition to kind of figure out like what's wrong and how to fix it. So when I stumbled on the first idea, it was kind of like an EMR, but for more like Indian socioeconomic environments where it started off with, I don't know if you knew, like about 20 years ago, female feticide was a big thing in India. They would do gender determination during pregnancy, figure out it was a girl and abort. And it became like that this sex ratio in India became like really wonky, where the number of girls, the number of guys was insane. So that's where I started coming out with this EMR where you can like record a pregnancy and figure out if, based on certain markers, if sex determination is being done. So that's kind of how it started and then grew into like an EMR system we were selling to like doctors and hospitals and, ended up getting sold for, I mean, I won't say a significant amount of money, but not an insignificant amount of money, just a lot for a 21-year-old to buy all the shoes she wants. So
Yeah.
it started over there. And then I came to the US and we started another business that eventually got sold, which was more like a community management system, which was also an enterprise business. And this is the next iteration.
Wow. Wow. So you've actually started and also successfully exited two businesses
Correct.
already. So I think I'm very interested for a lot of entrepreneurs that, they've built their business, they've scaled their business, but they've kind of gotten to a point that they don't know how to exit it either. What was that strategy for you? Like how would you suggest somebody that's going through that right now to actually potentially exit if they
A,
wanted to?
a really good book to read before you exit a business is called The Magic Box. And the TLDR of that book is businesses aren't sold, they're bought. And you have to recognize that the end of your journey is the beginning of the buyer's journey. Like that person is starting off with your product. So you need to be very cognizant about what kind of fit would it be. Like, is it a technical deficit that the buyer is buying you for? It's like, or is it deficit in terms of just market? Like they're trying to penetrate and capture more of the market, like what Netflix is trying to do with HBO Max right now. And now Paramount has suddenly come in, like it's a mess.
They acquired everything.
They're like, hey, we're going to buy everyone. Is Al Pacino for sale? We'll buy him too.
Be careful about the Netflix subscriptions now. They're about to go through the roof.
But yeah, they're kind of like, but they're buying for the user base and for the content. But, you need to see like where they'll fit, or they're buying you for customers. Like that's another, like, or another vertical or a segment that they haven't been able to penetrate. They're trying to buy it for that. So you need to figure out like what your buyer would like to buy you for. You can't just go and say, hey, I want to sell. Then the other thing is when you're building your business, you have to build it. When you start it, you have to think about exit. You have to think about a number at which you'll say, okay, I need to exit here. Or do I want to IPO? Like every founder I see says, hey, I want to IPO. But there's always a number where you're going to say, okay, that's great. Look at Cursor. They're like, okay, let's sell. There has to be a number in mind, and it has to be a legitimate number that you've done like a market analysis on. So you need to, when you start, you need to think about the end. Like that's the other thing. And the third thing is usually the people who buy you are already a customer or they're already a partner in some way. So they don't just come out of the blue.
Right.
They're either been like your biggest enterprise customer, they've been a partner in some way, shape, or form. So they've tried it, they've tested it, they know how it works, and then they jump into due diligence. It's much easier to sell. So before trying to go out and just find a buyer, go out and find a partner that they can test out, and then you can over time build a relationship and they buy.
Wow. That's some valuable tidbits that like for everybody as well. I think it's really interesting because when somebody's starting a business, like, I would not say at the point where successfully started and exited 3 different entrepreneurial ventures, or at least 2. I've successfully done 1, but I'm not definitely at a point of exiting it by any means. I think what I would actually want to ask you is, if somebody's in the beginning stage of their business and when you're kind of mapping out the most important significant roles that you need
Hmm.
covered, like let's say, for example, I wanted to start a SaaS company
Yeah.
tomorrow. What would you say are like, of course, you need the brains of the operation. You need like a CEO from a business side. You will need some type of developer to handle all the technical work as well. But what are these kind of like key roles that you think as an entrepreneur, some people are walking in by themselves. They get overwhelmed and they just stop. So what are those things that you think people should understand from the beginning?
I had a different answer to this question 6 months ago. Oh, since then, I've had a very radical shift in my ideology. The answer is try to hire as little as possible until you've not tested in the market. I mean, we are at a point when you have 10-person companies with with 50 million in revenue, 100 million in ARR, 10% team and went from 0 to 100 million. So we're in a very different creator economy now. We're not like in the business of, when Salesforce was there or when we were building CRMs and you needed 100 people to hit, 20 million ARR. That's just not there. Everything is available, not just by research. Like you just need to ask the question and something's available. So how I would approach it is find out what your strengths are and not just one strength. Like, you need to, what is that? The zones of excellence. Have like what you like to do versus what you're really good at. In this situation, I would say, what are you good at? Forget about like or dislike in the beginning. What are you good at or somewhat good at or passable at? Cover all of that yourself because with AI, you can, and then the remaining stuff that is pending, I think you should find a couple of more people who can cover the entire spectrum. Like get to MVP, get to testing in the market, because now it has never been easier to build a product. It has never been easier to test a product. You don't even need to go out to users. You need to do synthetic user testing first. AI is available for that as well. So get to MVP, get to market validation, and then start thinking about scale. So that's kind of how I would, if I were to go back and do it again, that's kind of how I would do it, which is like, I'd try to build it as a 1 or 2-person army and then kind of scale from there and then start hiring for key roles. And if I were to hire key roles and I'm in the tech space, I would hire exclusively for technical people, not even product. Product comes when there are users and product comes when there's a certain level of scale that you need to build a roadmap and you need to manage that. I think you need to just optimize for technical people. So you have an MVP. Now you need to say, okay, this is an enterprise product. There needs to be security. So I need a person who's really good at security and compliance. I need an IT guy. Or, I kind of, patch this as an MVP. Now I need somebody who can build the architecture really well. So I need a principal engineer. So you can then start hiring for people based on the gaps that you have left. But I think you can get to MVP on your own.
Very interesting. I think one piece of advice I got pretty young was, a lot of people, especially a lot of us entrepreneurs, like we end up worrying about our solution and mastering it before it even comes out
Hmm.
to market. And the reality is, especially now, purchaser habits have changed so much that you're not going to be able to just come with a product and expect it to
Hmm.
sell. I'll give you an example. It was like 5 or 6 years ago where I started that was my first ever business. So I started a local clothing brand, and I was like, okay, let me like, first step of entrepreneurship. I built an e-commerce shop. I was 18, 19 years old, and I was like, excited. It was COVID time and like just before COVID time. So I was like, okay, this is going to be what I'm going to retire with. This will be my final business that I'm going to do. And the reality was, I spent a lot of money without knowing who my market was. I spent it on mastering the
Wow.
fabric, mastering what type of designs I wanted to do. And I had put myself in a big financial hole before I had even sold one sweater. And I think the biggest lesson I learned from that was you need to just go to market first, and your market will tell you this is not the type of style I'm looking for. I'm looking for this fabric instead. Then you adjust, and you adjust as you're actually getting that money coming in. And honestly, that's the difference now. Like, I think with AI, which is actually a perfect transition, you set the transition of the conversation up perfectly. I think it's changing the skill gap now between people who were very, very seasoned and technical versus just an average person that doesn't really know much. Now I can go and not advertising just one AI tool, but whether it's Gemini, whether it's ChatGPT, whatever it is, a lot of your mainstream like tasks that used to spend hours, they're fully off of your table now as an entrepreneur. And you can really focus on more revenue generating or more high value activities, is what I like to tell everybody. I really am interested now, like from an AI perspective. Obviously, everybody's saying AI, AI, AI. It's like the biggest buzzword that we've heard since sliced bread. And, I like to say we had the internet revolution when everybody was coming online. Then we had applications when iPhone came out and we started having apps and the app store and everybody had a phone in their hands. But I would honestly argue that there is nothing that's been more significant than the emergence of AI. And this is probably the biggest market opportunity that at least everybody who's alive today has ever
Right.
seen. So I'm interested now from because you're very knowledgeable with this particular space. How do you see just the IT space and just the overall marketplace adopting AI over the next 5 to 10 years? And how do you see it changing like regular people's jobs, which is their biggest fear is I'm going to lose my job to
Um,
AI?
uh, it's a very loaded question. First,